Today I want to take a look at how to query the Microsoft Graph API from inside of PowerApps Canvas apps. And the reason we'd want this is to get more detail from the M365 suite out of a Graph API call and embed that to our Power App. So here we're looking at the Graph Explorer. We're doing a simple query for the Me endpoint to learn more about the current user. We've got user principal name, a couple of different fields, phone number, language, office location. And what you may want to do is use this endpoint to learn more about a particular user and get properties such as their department name or some sort of extra attribute that's only in Azure Active Directory. So here I'm going to specify a particular username, and there's autocomplete with the Graph Explorer, which is really cool. This helps us out. So as we're typing along, we get suggestions of what properties are available. And I'm going to go ahead and select a single property for the department name. And on this particular user, we can see the department name after we specify the UPN and that we want to select the department. This gives us a URL and a Graph API call that gives us rich data from other parts of the M365 suite. Of course, you have all sorts of other services you can query with Graph API, but for today, we're going to focus on user properties. And coming into the Azure portal, we can actually open Azure Active Directory, search for a user UPN, locate that one particular user object, and come in here to the Properties tab and see all kinds of values. And for that one, if we press Control F and type in department, we can confirm there's our property available. There's all sorts of other data available if we wanted to query, but for this demo, we're going to look at the department attribute of a single user as our example Graph API call, keeping in mind that we can query any other parts of the M365 suite by using other Graph API calls. Now to embed that into a PowerApps Canvas app, we're going to create a new blank Canvas app. We'll go ahead and put down the name of the app. And on the app canvas, we're going to go ahead and insert a couple of different controls. We're going to have a text input, we're going to have a second text input, and we're going to have a button. And over here on the button, we can put Query Azure AD as our label. That's right. And that will be what invokes the Graph API call. Over here on the input field, we can put in the user principal name of a user we want to look up. And then down here, we'll put the result output that comes from the query. So for right now, that's our scaffolding, our template of what the Canvas app would look like. Of course, you can change this to be an on-start event or other changing events. But the idea is that we input the UPN, we query, and then come back with a return value. So that gives us our canvas for the front end. Now to make all of this work, we need to create an app registration first. So here we're going to make a new app registration. We'll name it the same as our Power App. We'll go with the default settings. We want to come into client secrets and issue one new client secret. I'll pick out 24 months and go ahead and copy the value into the clipboard. And over here on the overview, I'm going to copy the application client ID. There's a couple different GUID numbers. This is the one that we want for the application itself. And coming over to the redirect URLs, we will need to add one of these. And the redirect URL is going to be global consent for Azure APIM. And we'll go ahead and allow the access tokens. We'll configure that, and it updated our app registration. So again, we have global consent for the URL, and we have both of the checkboxes turned on at the bottom. That gives us what we need in the Azure app registration. In the configurations for Power Platform, we want to go to make.powerapps.com, Dataverse, Custom Connector, New, and select blank. So you're going to do New blank. This gives us a wizard that we can walk through. This gives us a new wizard we can walk through, and we want to put down the host name of how we're doing our query. So here we have graph.microsoft.com, graph.microsoft.com, that's right. and that's going to be our host header. Everything else we'll leave at the defaults on wizard screen number one. This is a 5-step wizard. So really the effort of setting this up is in the custom connector. This is where we're teaching the Power Platform how to make that API call. We go select OAuth 2.0. We pick out Azure Active Directory for our authentication provider. We give it a client ID GUID. We give it a client secret. And down here for resource URL, we put in graph.microsoft.com with the HTTPS. So our inputs are really the client ID secret with graph.microsoft and picking Azure AD as our authentication schema. On the definition tab 3, this is the most important part. Here's where we're actually going to teach it how to do the user call in Graph API. So we're going to import a sample, and this is where we need to bring things from Graph Explorer into Custom Connector. So how did we do this in Graph Explorer? Well, it's a GET request, and here's the address, and there's some stuff with headers. But for what we're doing, we're going to do GET, and we're going to pick out the address. We're going to make one very important change. In the URL, there was a single user principal name. We are going to change that to curly braces. And actually, I'm just going to change it to UPN. 3 simple letters, UPN. And we'll go ahead and import that. And now you can see that the wizard parsed out 2 parameters, the $select on the query and the UPN for the path. It was intelligent enough to split up what I gave it and identify 2 different tokens. Those tokens will become import parameters when we make the call. So in the response, we can give it a body of what the JSON response looks like coming back. Go ahead and import there. And that teaches it the schema of what kind of fields to expect. And the reason that part is important is it gives us something to work with. Yeah, OData department. Here you go. It says department. So it knows that department is a field. It knows that's part of the return schema. That's significant because when we get into our Canvas app and we want IntelliSense and we start doing dot for autocomplete, it now knows what the schema looks like. For a code preview, really haven't used this. I just click next to go to test. We create the connector by first clicking the create button. That saves the definition into the system, and now we'll be in a spot where we can test it. Okay, so here we see a successful message at the top, an update button in the top right, and the ability to test it by giving 2 inputs. For the connection, we need to authenticate. So here we're going to click create. We're going to pick out our current user, do one of these OAuth pop-up flows. This is the first time coming into it. It's all brand new. We're adding this connection. It's a custom connection. We're doing it for the very first time. So what we're going to see is one of these permission grant pop-up screens that goes back to the Azure app registration. And this is the app info. This is the name of the app. All of this stuff that's coming here is your app registration. I like to check the box for consenting on behalf of the organization so that everyone can use it. And the permissions are identified. They're very simple. It's the default permission to read the user profile, who's logged in. And that helps authenticate and protect this API call. We did nothing with our app registration permissions. We simply used the default. And you can see that by coming back over here to the app registrations API permission, and all we have is a defaulted user read delegate. That's the default one that you get when you create a new app. So we'll go ahead and click OK, and we'll do the accept button to move forward. There we are. So under custom connections, we now have a new item in our connections with the bright green icon. Cool. And under custom connectors, we have a single item, the one we created for the Graph API call. Back into our Canvas app, if we come over to the left and we do add data, we can type in the name of the connection we just created. We get one result here. Very cool. It is a premium connector, something to know about, but that makes sense. It's doing HTTP calls, so it's kind of normal. And then over here in the button click, what we're going to do is teach it how to make the call and then put the department value into a variable. So our button click is actually going to be a set command. So we're going to type this out for IntelliSense so you guys get to see the full experience. We're going to define a variable called department, right? And just for kind of simplicity, we can define it to the word hello, just some sort of string, right? And down here on the bottom one, we're going to display the value of department. If we play that app and click the button, we get the word hello. That's setting a variable with a string. Very simple. We're setting a variable with a string. But we don't want the word hello, do we? We want something more than that. Let's go to Power Apps. There's our connection, and there's a dot action. And what are we going to see? The action we defined with the wizard. And inside of that, we can feed it a UPN. There it is. Very cool. Very cool. So here I'm going to give it text input one dot text. That gives it the UPN of who we're actually wanting to look up. And for our select statement, we actually want to feed it that the dollar select will be the word department. And that becomes part of our data call. Now the return type of that was the JSON body. And remember how we gave it the JSON body of the return when we were defining the wizard? That's where we get our dot complete based on the schema. We can pick out the word department. So this expression at the top is how we're defining everything into a single button click. And if we wanted to break it down, a little bit more kind of granular, make this easier to read, set department, break to new line, the name of the connector, dot the verb, giving it the input, giving it the select, returning the department value. You're looking at something kind of like this, where the two essential inputs are the UPN and then the dollar select. And that was how we defined our connection. So we gave it the parameter for what we're selecting, we gave it the UPN of who we're selecting, and this is flexible. We could change this. Leave the connection alone, nothing in the back end. As a front-end developer, we could select any property we want. And then down here, this was the JSON body of the return schema. So you may need to update your connection if you're going to start playing with different values to get returned, but trying to make it as flexible as we can. So that's breaking down the expression of what the code looks like. And with our updated data connection, we can come into Query Azure AD, confirm our button formula looks correct, hit the play icon in the top right. We'll go and clear out the text value from our prior testing. And now we can go ahead and click Query Azure AD to execute the query for this UPN. And now with our connection updated, we can come to the canvas of our Power App and play the app forward. Click the button and let's see, get our data connection to invoke.